Hello, this is Robert Kiyosaki. This is my sweetheart, Kim.
Hello.
And we're going to be talking about how we got out of debt. Our story actually begins around 1984 when we first got together as a couple. And I was personally deeply in debt. I had lost nearly $1 million in one of my many businesses. And I still owed another $400,000. $500,000 was paid off. So when I met Kim, I was like this big albatross around her financial neck because I had no money. On top of that, I was in debt. So step number one is you got to tell yourself the truth. And I think that's one of the hardest things I had to do because, Kim had never met a financial disaster like me before. She couldn't believe anybody could be driving a Mercedes and living in a nice hotel right on the shores of Diamond Head and be flat broke, but also deeply in debt. And I kept pretending I was rich, and that was, I was faking it till I make it, and, I was praying to God and Jesus and Buddha and hoping that money would come by and pretending I had no debt, and I was looking good and, eating in the best restaurants and flaunting the cash, but I was flat broke. You can fake your girlfriends, but you can't fake your wife. And so the first thing I had to do with Kim was sit down and eventually tell her the truth that I wasn't as rich as I looked.
Well, it's true. You've got to tell yourself the truth, because if you have a goal of where you want to go, you're not going to be able to get there if you don't know where you are.
Yeah.
So basically, it's telling yourself the truth, not lying to yourself, not pretending anymore. Here's the hard facts. Here's where I am. So once you have sat down and faced that you're going to tell yourself the truth, the step number 2 is you've got to stop accumulating the bad debt.
Yes, and what that meant was sometimes you might have to make a little bit of sacrifice. And when Kim and I moved from Hawaii to California and we went homeless right away, and we were living in the garage basement apartment, there was sometimes I had to run up. We had no money, so Kim had like $2 to get through Friday, Saturday, and Sunday till I came home Sunday night and hopefully got paid for what I was doing. So I want you to tell them how you survived on $2.
Well, first of all, gas costs, so I didn't want to use up a lot of gas and drive to a lot of places. And there was this little taco stand that I could walk to. It was about 3 blocks from where we lived. And so I'd walk down this little taco stand, get my little cheese and chicken quesadilla, and it cost me $1. And then I'd walk back and I'd have my quesadilla, and the next day I'd walk down and have a second quesadilla, and that's $2. And that's basically how we would survive at times.
Right, and Kim is, she has a great figure and all that, but she does like to eat. But she was able to make 4 meals out of 2 for $2, and she survived. And I'd come home, Sunday night from a trip or either Monday morning. And then we had some money again, but then we went through the process of first getting out of bad debt rather than going out to a restaurant and sucking down some $100 bottle of wine and eating some prime rib and stuff. So we lived pretty frugally during this period of time till we got our feet on the ground and built a new business.
So really what we did is we put a freeze on all of accumulating more debt on our credit card, because for one reason, we couldn't use our credit cards because they were so maxed out. So again, we did have to make some sacrifice, but that alone started putting us into control of handling our money. Which brings us to the next step. Step number 3 is make a list of all, and the key word is all, the debt that you owe.
And she's still giving me a dirty look when she says the word all, because I had so much debt I didn't want to tell her. And I kept sneaking off and paying bills here and sneaking around there. And finally she says, because I didn't want to tell her how bad the Titanic was that I ran aground and called my last business. And finally we had to sit down and I had to write down all the investors I owed money to, all the friends and family I owed money to, and everybody I felt bad about, that I was still not paying and things like this. So she had me sit down and write. And even, the credit card companies, they get really nasty when you don't pay them. So I had to show her the envelopes I was receiving from the angry credit card companies and all this stuff, and basically tell the truth and face the music. So step number 4 is a very important step. And all you guys out there who are deeply in debt and all this, I'd like to say this is probably the most important first real step you can go through, or a major commitment, and that is hire a bookkeeper. If you look in the workbook, I talk about a bookkeeper as part of your team. And there was times, I was just trying to do my own books, and when I'm stressed out and embarrassed and upset that I owe so much money, I would not really confront the truth. Plus I'm messy. I'm not very detail oriented. So Kim and I finally went out, and my rich dad talked to me, and we're talking over with him. He says, "Do you have a bookkeeper?" And I said, "No, because it costs too much money." And he says, "Look, rich people have bookkeepers. Poor people don't. You have got to keep accurate records. And you're not supposed to do that, because your job is to make money, not to keep track of the money necessarily. Her job is to give you accurate records that you can look at, and a bookkeeper is the most important part of your team." So I say this right now because when I was facing so much debt, it was really hard to go and spend $200 to $400 a month on a bookkeeper. But it was one of the most important steps. And for those who read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, in there, my rich dad always say, never say I can't afford it, because poor people say I can't afford it. So a bookkeeper was somebody that was very important. An important expense and key to us getting out of debt, because every month old Betty would force, especially me and Kim, to sit down and look at our financial situations, and we had to come up with a plan of how we were going to get out of debt.
Okay, well, this is step number 5, and now that you've got a list of every debt that you owe, you're going to make a visual picture of that debt. And very simply, what you're going to do is you're going to draw a quadrant for each debt. And in the upper left-hand column of the quadrant, you're going to put the creditor. So, for example, it might be Visa. In the upper right-hand column goes the total amount owed, total balance owed. Bottom left-hand corner goes the minimum monthly amount that you have to pay every month. And in the bottom right-hand corner, you're going to divide your total amount due into the monthly payments.
So in the example in the workbook, it's Visa, minimum $100 a month, $2,000 total payments, and that means the number 20 means it'll take you 20 months to wipe out this debt.
Yeah, you basically take the total amount due, which is $2,000, divided by 100, and that equals 20 months. So for every single debt that you have, you're going to draw this visual. And again, refer to the workbook because it's in there. It'll make it very, very clear. But for every single debt, you're going to set up this quadrant, and you're going to have this circled number that says how many months it will take to pay these off.
So if you go to the diagram, with me, I had several Visa cards, several MasterCards. One at American Express, American Express really gets nasty, which was good, but they really came after me hard. And then there was other things like school loans, car loans are number 2, personal loans. So all of these debts we had to line up, plus I had creditors I owed money to. Okay, so let's go to step number 6, because one of the reasons Kim and I got so much richer faster was we paid off our house, everything, because that's bad debt. A lot of people call your house an asset, but it was really a liability. Is it a good investment? Yes, but I don't want to make monthly payments to live there for the rest of my life, because that's bad debt to me. So with this process, you can get completely out of debt, including your house and cars, if you follow it step by step. So step number 6 is to determine the order for paying off each debt.
And this is where that little circled number is going to come into play. You're going to start with the smallest circled number you have. And if you look in the workbook, that's not the Visa payment that we just talked about. Visa payment came in at number 6, but the smallest circled number was number 8, which was a department store credit card loan. It was $800 owed, and you had to pay $100 a month, so the circled number was 8. That's the smallest number in the example that we use, so that's number 1. That means you're going to pay that debt off first. And people often say, I want to make one comment, this does not take into account the interest rate on the debt. And shouldn't I pay off my biggest interest rate first? Don't we want to get the one with the highest interest rate off the books first? Not necessarily in this formula. In this formula, you want to see a result quickly. You want to know that this formula works. So we're going to take the shortest debt that you have, the one that you can pay off the quickest. And when you see that result, when you see that paid off, you can see the formula working, you have a win, it'll encourage you to move forward. So that's why we start with the smallest number.
So in this example in the workbook is the department store credit card, total debt owes $800, minimum payment $100 a month, so it would take 8 months. So it's nothing, as Kim says, it's not about the interest payment, it's the fastest one you can wipe out immediately.
Right, and we want to keep it simple. So go through every diagram you have of every debt and look at that circle number and put them in order from smallest to largest, and that's the order you're going to be paying off these debts.
Once you have all the numbers lined up, then step number 7 is...
This is the key, and this is really the only thing you really have to put some effort into. And all you have to do is come up with an extra $100 or $200 per month.
And what do you do with that $100 or $200 a month?
Well, first of all, people are going to say, oh, how do you come up with an extra $100? I'm strapped. I'm up to here. I can't make any more money. What do I do? What do I do? And so Robert and I were talking about, well, what did we do?
We went and started little seminars.
We had little seminars, 10 people.
Yeah, so once a month, we'd put on this little seminar and people would pay like $300 and all that. And after all our costs, actually we started making quite a bit more money just doing those little seminars.
It kept growing.
Like I said, when you have those creditors screaming at you, that's better motivation than those piggy banks who want you to invest in them. So when they were screaming at us, every month we would do these little seminars, do a little advertising, and people would show up. And after we paid all our costs, we had a few extra dollars. We paid our taxes. And then that was the extra money with which we went after all the debt. But just make that extra $100, and whatever you make is then focused onto that debt pile.
Which goes up to step number 8, and this is where we're going to start paying off that first debt, which is the $800 credit card from the department store. Now, let me start here. What you're going to do, except for debt number 1, you are only going to pay the minimum amount due. No more.
On all the other debts.
On everything else.
And you're just putting this laser hawk-like focus on debt number 1, which is the $800.
Yep, and let me guess that some of you, as I was told, no, you have to pay off a little bit more on every credit card, and that's how you're going to get out of debt. And I did that, and Robert and I did that, and we just never got ahead. It didn't seem to make a dent in what we were doing. So I knew that formula wasn't going to work. So again, minimum monthly amount due on every other debt except debt number 1.
And then because we stepped it up to, let's say, $200, instead of taking 8 months, it took 4 months to wipe it out entirely.
Right, because debt number 1, your minimum amount is $100. You're now going to take that extra $100 that you've made, and you're going to apply it to debt number 1. So instead of $100, you're going to pay $200. So instead of paying it off in 8 months, it's going to take you 4 months.
Boom! And it's gone. And all of a sudden they go, holy moly, now.
Celebrate.
You celebrate, but now you have an extra $200 because you got the $100 that you were paying off on that credit card debt or that department store debt, and you have the extra $100 you make in a month, so you have $200, and now you can go attack the next one.
And this is, again, why we start with the shortest time period possible, because, wow, look, it works. All right, I got rid of a debt. And so that's one of the most important things, is to keep your confidence up as you go through the process. Step number 9, time to move on to debt number 2. Now, here's what you do. Debt number 1, you've been paying $200 a month. So you go to debt number 2. If you look in the workbook, debt number 2 is a jewelry installment plan. You owe $400. Your minimum payment is $45. So instead of paying just $45 every month, you're going to pay $45 plus the $200 you were paying on debt number 1. So you're going to pay $245 a month on debt number 2, and guess how long that's going to take you to pay that off? Less than 2 months.
Poof!
Done.
Gone.
Celebrate.
Yep.
So you cross that one off. Now you move on to debt number 3. Look in the workbook, and that is a home store credit card. And debt number 3 is $120 minimum payment. Add the $245 you were paying on debt number 2. You're now paying $365, and your total debt is $1,200. So it's going to take you, instead of, as it looks, 10 months, it's going to take you much shorter than that to pay that off. And you'd keep going through this process, adding every time to your new debt the amount you were paying from the last debt.
Obviously, this is not going to work if you pay off one debt and you go back into debt, or that you pay off 1 or 2 and then you go back to making the minimum payments. What you're doing is you're laser focusing on wiping out each one of these debts or loans that you own until they're all wiped out. And if you follow this process, it should take you 7 to 8 years to completely wipe out even your home mortgage. And then the next step 10 is how we became financially free instead of going back into debt or just spending that cash on doodads and things like this. For those of you who are rich dad, poor dad, or played the cash flow game, you know what we do is we invest that money even faster. So in this case, all that money, instead of spending it, we just kept buying more properties, stocks, bonds. We never buy mutual funds. But we had money to invest at even greater rate of speed. And that's how our investment rate went from 30% up to 80% today, and is now in the millions of dollars we're continuing to reinvest. And we live off of our cash flow from our properties. So it's really interesting how this process starts to snowball. It's a compounding effect of getting richer and richer faster. So this process of getting out of debt was how we started in 1984, and I was really in bad shape. And Kim applied some discipline and some truth-telling to the process, and holding my feet to the fire, and we had Betty to keep my conscience in and remind me. And in 10 years, we not only were out of debt, we were financially free. We're making about $10,000 a month, about $120,000 a year, and our expenses were about $36,000 a year. So every month we made about $10,000 from our rental properties and about $3,000 in expenses, and we just still to this day, 10 years later or 20 years later, we just keep doing the same thing, and now it's in the millions of dollars. Same habit, same process, staying out of debt, getting richer and richer. We have a lot of good debt, lots and lots of apartment houses and commercial buildings, but that's good debt, and that's how we get richer and richer and reinvesting it.